Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of hippoBrain. This is going to be a very different one. It is a story I find extremely inspirational. I've heard Rehan at multiple occasions. I've had the pleasure of meeting him in flesh and blood, and it is nothing but an inspirational story. But it's something that I think you guys should know about and you guys should spread. Over to Rajesh to explain our guest, Rehan Poncha.
Hi everyone, welcome to another hippoBrain. Welcome to the show, Rehan.
Thank you.
So let me start with a little brief about Rehan. Essentially started swimming at age 7. 15 years of hard work, dedicated work, amazing discipline, represents India in the 2008 Beijing Olympics, becomes only the 7th Indian swimmer since India's independence to represent India in swimming. Wins the Arjuna Award in 2010 at age 24. At 27, 28, he sort of gives up, retires from swimming, takes up a new sport, golf, another huge mountain to climb. Rehan is with us today. We'll cover his journey. But more importantly, along with, of course, celebrating Rehan's achievements, I think it's really about that discipline, that mental strength through 20 years and reaching the pinnacle. Many people start sports. We have all start our stuff. We give up sort of en route. How did Rehan do it? That's what we'll talk about today. So Rehan, let's begin with your initial journey. How did you get into swimming and how did you end up at the Beijing Olympics?
Okay, so thank you, Rajesh. Thank you, Jaimit, for that sweet, nice introduction. And I'm really looking forward to this session. I'll get straight to your question. How I got into swimming was, I actually got into it by default. As a kid at the age of 6, between the age of 5 and 7, actually, I used to get very recurring bronchitis, coughs, colds, fevers. So to combat that and to increase my immunity, the doctors advised my parents that they should take me to a swimming pool and get me swimming. Now, at the time, I was also doing a couple of other things. So I did a little bit of cricket. I did a lot of dance in Bombay, and I did some swimming. And it was one day where my dad asked me, he said that I should choose one thing to do and then do it a little more seriously. And I chose dance because honestly, who wouldn't prefer the warmth of a spotlight on stage over the freezing cold water of a swimming pool? Definitely not a 7-year-old. So I said, I'm going to dance. And I went to dance practice that day. My dad dropped me off, and the dance instructor said that on that day today is going to be the first day. And for the next whole month, we're going to introduce duet dance, so partner dance. And I was 7. I was an extremely shy kid. So the thought of, having my arms wrapped around a girl for an entire month was an absolute nightmare. Things have changed now, but I think at 7, it was quite scary. So I looked at everybody around the class, and there were a lot of confident boys, and they were approaching a lot of these girls. I had absolutely no confidence. I managed to slink out of the back of the classroom. I ran to the parking lot. Luckily for me, my dad was still there, and I told him, Dad, I want to swim. And as funny as it sounds, that's actually one of the biggest reasons why I chose to swim over dance. And though it wasn't my first decision, but more importantly, and though this story is funny, more importantly, why I decided to make swimming a career was, I think, when I was 8 years old, I swam my first competitive tournament at the Otters Club. It was an Otters Club gala in Bombay, and I finished second last. And when I finished second last in that tournament, I remember I cried all the way back home, and like an absolute spoiled brat. And it became very clear to me over that day that I was an extremely competitive child. And it was very important to me to be able to set a goal and see it through and achieve it. And this is not something that was really taught to me. This was something that I discovered within myself. And so for me, it was absolutely unacceptable that I should be finishing second last in a swimming tournament, which is why I decided I'm going to pursue this a little better and get the right coaching and see where it takes me, literally. And I was really going into it blind. And 3 months later, I won my first silver medal at the the under-7 state championships in Maharashtra. So what that did for me was, and it did a couple of things. One is that it turned a very shy, low self-confidence kid whose success was measured by how fast he could run 100 meters in school. And let me tell you, I was dead last in all those 100-meter races. And as children, we are at that point, how we were defined by how good an athlete we were, by how fast we could do that dash. So it took a very, very shy, low on self-confidence, 7.5-year-old kid, and you gave him something that he felt he could belong to. And it was his little niche for himself. So I took that, I took it as my own. And over time, over that first year, I realized that there were many things I loved about the sport, apart from competing. For example, I would love the sound that, my arm made when it entered the water. And that is something that never left me for 20 years of my swimming career. I would absolutely love the feeling of getting up on a starting block and being competitive and being able to race against other kids and winning and not winning. But I would just love that feeling of competition and also the feeling of preparation. And when I speak to young kids today, I always call this point, I say it's important to find your calling. This is what I call it. And for me, I realized at that point at 8 and between the age of 8 and 9, that swimming was my calling. And for me, it was a combination of everything I have spoken of that contributed to that decision of saying, okay, this is something that I know I do quite well. I know that there is a long way to go, but it is something that I love doing. I have found little things within the sport that speak to me at a very deep level. And most importantly, it gave me an identity. And that is something I feel that before we get to lessons for the corporate world, I think it's important to realize that whether you're a child or whether you're a super successful person at 50, everybody's looking for that one thing that they can call home, and for me, the swimming pool was that. Needless to say that I spent more hours at a swimming pool than I did in my bed at home or in my bedroom or with my parents. So it automatically became my home. My second home was probably my car that we used in Bombay traffic to get from home to pool. But this became my home. It felt more like a comfort zone than anything else I did in my life. And like I said, I was very shy. So something as simple as going to a friend's birthday party felt more daunting and felt more like I was outside my comfort zone there than getting up and racing in front of the entire country at the age of 9 with nervousness, of course. That felt more close to me and that felt home. And for all of these reasons, I believe that swimming was the thing for me to do for, the next decade.
So that's interesting, Rehan. Yes, it is. It's quite funny, and I'm a swim parent, as you are aware. And I sometimes even wonder what makes my daughter want to swim. We also don't know why she took to water, etc. But yeah, in some sense, it's just, according to me, I think all swim parents are mad people, which is a separate story. But all swimmers seem to be thoda sa screw dhila hai. Yeah. There is no reason to wake up at 5 in the morning, go into the cold water in the morning, swim like crazy, gym like crazy, figure out, give up a lot on your social life, give up a lot on friends, etc. And the most difficult part, as I understand it, is on the swimming pool, inside the pool, you're alone. And Correct. It's just you and the water. And I know this story because you're fighting the clock when you can't see the clock.
Right.
And that gives me a dovetail into the story on how you made the Olympic cutoff. And if you can just give us some perspective on that, I think that'll be interesting.
Okay, so I'm going to take you very quickly through those years. So at the age of, and I'll speak first of success. So by the time I was 11, I became sub-junior national champion in my age group category. At the age of 12, I hit a sort of a plateau in terms of improvement where I went from being a national champion to being unable to qualify for a single race the next year at the age of 12 at nationals. And at that point, I realized that I had to do something different. And I qualified, I remember, only for one relay to represent Maharashtra at that particular nationals. And I was very distraught, obviously, because all my teammates were racing individual events and I wasn't. So I decided that I must do something different. I spoke to my dad at that nationals, and we were watching all the swimmers from Karnataka do really well at that tournament. And I went up to him after the tournament and I said, take me to Bangalore. You know, literally like it was asking my dad to take me to a friend's house. And a week later, and this is no exaggeration, a week later, my mom, dad, and I had all moved state and business completely just for my sport. And we were in Bangalore, we were training, and within the next year, I regained all that lost ground and became national champion again. Fast forward to the age of 16, I became the senior national champion. So that's India's fastest swimmer across all age groups. And the success that I enjoyed at the time was, and I'll give you the best example, I won't speak of the medals, is that when I would have press interactions, for example, all my interviews and press interactions would happen before my races were swum. So the media, the press reporters would ask me questions like, how did it feel to break a national record? And I would look at them and say, but I haven't even raced yet. But they said, it does not matter. We know you're going to win. And we've got a deadline to submit our press release. So this is the sort of, it came with pressure, but this is the sort of reputation that and success, of course, that I enjoyed at that point. Having said that, a coach came up to us at a senior national championship and said, Rehan is the fastest, one of the fastest 200 butterflyers in the country. So why doesn't he try and attempt to qualify for the Athens Olympics? Now, the Athens Olympics was in 2004. We were a year out. And I took this up as a personal challenge that I'm going to try and make it be possibly the youngest, one of the youngest or the youngest Olympian that India ever had. And I made it my dream. It wasn't my dream really at the point, the biggest focus, but I made it so, and I tried everything. I trained in India, we trained abroad. Basically, I did everything that I felt I possibly could. Unfortunately, I went to the one qualifier that I chose to swim at the Malaysian Open to make the Athens Olympics cut, and I didn't make it. I felt at that point, when I look back, that I was both physically and mentally not ready. I wasn't mature enough to make that cut. And I remember I watched the opening ceremony of the Athens Olympics on television, and I cried literally as I watched. A lot of my teammates from other sports, a lot of other coaches, watched them at the opening ceremony in Athens. I was sitting in my home in Bangalore, and I realized at that point that there was nothing more in the world I wanted than to be there. And at that point, I realized that this was my new destination and my new goal, which was 2008. 1 month later, I visited the Baswangudi Aquatic Center in Bangalore. It was 5:20 a.m. in the morning. That's when we usually start swimming. And my coach, who is now India's national coach, I think, he was walking around the pool deck. I went up to him and he asked me, Rehan, you've achieved so much. What do you want from me? And I was very single-minded, clear in my answer. I said, I want to be at the Olympics. I want to be an Olympian, and in turn, I want to make you an Olympian. And, with that, we got started with 4 years of very, very intense preparation. And I kept improving in the 200-meter butterfly event. The qualifying time for the Athens Olympics was 2 minutes and 4 seconds. 1 year out of the Beijing Olympics, I hit that mark of 2 minutes and 4 seconds. Unfortunately for me, the World Swimming Body had further made the time faster to 2 minutes and 1 second. Now, I was well aware of that at the time, but the fact that I had reached a goal that I had once set for myself, even albeit 3 years ago, was extremely inspiring and motivating to keep pushing. And I had 1 year to go leading up to the Olympics. I had 4 chances to make the qualifying time. I raced the Malaysian Open, I raced the Singapore Open, and I raced once in India. And with every swim I did, I got faster and faster. So I went from 2 minutes and 4 seconds to 3 seconds to 2 seconds. And then I had one more chance to make the qualifying time. I was about a second away. And I found myself in this beautiful stadium in Sydney. on the 3rd of July, 2008. And I had two chances to make this qualifying time. I had a heat swim in the evening and I had a final swim in the morning, the next morning. And in the heat swim, I went 2:01. I went the qualifying time, but I missed it by 0.25 of a second. Now, 0.25 of a second is half of half a second. And you couldn't even do it on your hands if you tried to, clap. So that's how little I missed it by. We didn't sleep. And when I say we, it was my dad, my coach, and I. And nobody really got sleep that entire night. We could actually feel, pressure building. I landed up there the next morning at the pool, and 5 minutes before my race, I remember thinking that if I do not, if I fail to make this qualifying time this time around, it's possibly going to be the last race of my career, because I am not going to try another 4 years. And that's how big the moment was, and that's how much it meant to me. And then I reminded myself that if this was going to be the last race of my swimming career, do I owe it to myself to hurt under pressure and not enjoy the moment? Because it would be close to 15 years, like you mentioned, in the start of my my career, and this would be the ending race. So I decided two things. I decided I'm going to enjoy the moment. I'm going to enjoy all 2 minutes and change seconds of this race. And I also decided that I'm not going to let pressure ruin any chance I have of qualifying. In retrospect, I think about that day and I realized that if I had let pressure and fear ruin that moment for me, it would be the equivalent of disrespecting my effort. And I always say this, and I say it another 2 times to students and to young people who are going in for interviews and for big days of their life, where I say that you worked so hard over a period of time and you finally got a chance to prove yourself. And if you let nervousness and self-doubt affect you, it is basically disrespecting your effort. We get so upset when people disrespect us, but we don't really think twice about hurting ourselves or disrespecting ourselves. I raced that swim. I finished those 4 laps next to New Zealand's fastest swimmer, Moss Burmester, who was basically my pacemaker through that entire race. And when I touched the wall, I was too afraid to look at the timing display. So I looked in the gallery to see the reaction of my coach and my dad, and they were absolutely ecstatic, which is, when I realized that I had finally qualified. 1 month later, I found myself standing as part of a select group of one of 62 Indians from a population of 1.2 billion people, good enough to represent their country's flag at the Olympics. 20 yards down the line in that little group was the Indian flag bearer. You could see the Indian flag and your country's name is called out and you march out onto the opening ceremony. Sure enough, I looked to my right and my coach was there, and I looked to him and I said, "Look, sir, we made it." And you talked a little while earlier about sacrifices and why you do it. Maybe I'm jumping the gun and answering your question for you. But when I did that little lap around the Beijing arena, and I swam 4 days later with my parents watching me from the gallery, my coaches, and close to 300 swimmers who had all trained with me through those 4 years back home in Bangalore, watching me on the big screen. When I relived those moments and I lived those moments live, I realized that all those sacrifices, that we make as teenagers, where we have to tell pretty girls that you're busy with training and you can't make it, or you have to miss holidays with family, or you have to do something as horrible as diving into a cold pool at 5:20 in the morning. All those sacrifices feel worth it. I'm not saying I'd do it all over again, but I'm saying that it feels like it's actually very difficult to put into words the emotion that you go through, especially when you relive it. And Jemit knows this. I've done several, talks over the last 8 years. And every time I talk about these moments, I get goosebumps because I realize the absolute value of them, of being able to realize dreams that you may have set for yourself when you were 7 years old and you watched your heroes achieve. And also being able to tell yourself at the age of 23 that, sure, I was courageous enough to set a goal for myself and I failed and I was human, but I found the strength to reinvent, to try differently and try again. And I succeeded. And these are little lessons that I use and carry forth today when I play my second sport. And these are lessons that I teach children that I coach or I mentor. That, there's a quote that I'm sure you all both know of. It's called, success is never final and failure is never fatal. Success is never final and learning never ends. And these are the two biggest lessons that I learned through my career. So I've taken you all through, I think, close to the 8 most important years of my career in about 5 minutes. But I'm sure from my words, you can understand what the moment meant to me and what the journey meant, to me and to people around me who cared for my sport very much.
Rehan, I mean, I'm telling you, I'm listening to you for the first time today, to relive your story, and it's amazing. I mean,
thank you.
I can just feel my body, the way when you walk through those years.
Yes.
That moment in the pool in Sydney. I mean, it's incredible. And many times we sort of see sportsmen. I mean, we see it on TV, of course, in the IPL and cricket. And for us, a lot of defining memory is Chak De, the movie.
Correct.
Which sort of brought the emotions. But I think what we miss out on really is the emotions which are there. And what you've brought out is sort of there are a lot of lows which are there, but there are the few highs that you have to that you experience.
Yes.
Absolutely amazing. And there are so many similarities which I can see with the life of an entrepreneur.
Correct.
It's the journey that matters more than sort of the destination itself.
Absolutely. Rajesh, when you mentioned, that there are a lot of failures and you talked about television. Today, as young athletes and as regular people, we are exposed to mostly success, whether it is online or whether it is in the newspapers or magazines. And this is a very good trend, and it's a very positive thing where you're shown so much success that you can remain optimistic always in your thought process. But very, very few people talk about, or very few of us know about the struggles or the failures, so to speak, that the greatest face and deal with till they ultimately are good enough to show you that moment of lifting those big trophies. And there's that quote by Michael Jordan where he says, I think 500 times odd I've been trusted to make the winning shot for my team, and I've failed over 10,000 times in my career, and that is why I succeed. And it's true, because when we talk to a young athlete today, I ask them, what did you learn from the day you won your gold medal and you broke your state or national record? And they really have nothing to say, because we never really learn anything. Of course, the really professional athletes at a more mature stage do, but we rarely learn from our successes. We are too busy celebrating our successes. Where we can always learn from are our failures. And to do that, you have to first teach the athlete or whoever it is that to understand that the failure happened because of a reason. And if you're open enough to learning, which is why I said learning never ends, and you have an ego small enough to also appreciate that you can learn from your mistakes, that is where I feel you eventually grow into doing better and being at the top of your game.
Beautifully put, Rehan. And a lot of people think, when you talked about success on TV, that success comes sort of overnight.
Yes.
What they miss out on is those, in your case, those 15 years of daily discipline.
Correct.
Of the hard work that you've put in.
Right.
I'd love to talk a little about that.
Sure.
How do you develop that mental strength day after day, you're doing the same thing, where every day the goal is you wake up in the morning, I have to do a little bit better than what I did yesterday. Correct. How does that play out?
So you're being extremely optimistic when you say that every morning you wake up, you go into practice with the thought that I have to do a little bit better. That is an ideal world, and I don't believe there's any such thing as a perfect reality. But it's a beautiful way of looking at your training for the day. And of course, you understand purely by knowing that it's extremely difficult conditions that we train in, whether it is cold water or it is windy conditions, or it's just sheer exhaustion of week to week of practice. The longest break I had in my career was 3 weeks. over 20 years of sport, I never took a break longer than 3 weeks. And that 3 weeks happened because I had an intercostal muscle tear. Otherwise, it would have been possibly a week or so. And I'll tell you what, I wouldn't say, I won't tell you how I did it, but I'll tell you why it was easier for me to do it. And the reason was that I was very good at, and this is what we teach a lot of kids, I was very good at setting short-term goals for myself. So, and sure, it's very important to have that one, big thing that you want to achieve at the, which is your biggest goal or your biggest dream. But I believe that should always be something that is placed in the background or at the back of your head. And you know that it's there and you know that it's massive. But if you let that massive thing become your short-term goal, it's going to overwhelm you. And there is a very good possibility that you may not succeed at first, like I failed several times, and you stop, you get dejected and you stop. Instead of that, if you can continue to have that, short-term, long-term goal, but you can also set little short-term, more achievable, we have it, we call it SMART, right? Realistic, achievable, time-bound, I can't remember all of it, but they are basically realistic short-term goals that you set for yourself, that you know that with hard work and the correct work you can achieve. And those in turn inspire you to wake up the next morning and to try again and to try again. And that's basically what I did. Part of it was also honestly out of habit, where you do something so much for so long. So ever since I was 7, my life was waking up in the morning, going to practice, school, going back to practice, and you sort of become, it always hurts. No practice doesn't hurt. But it also, you sort of become numb to it, where you accept that it's going to hurt and you accept that it's going to be hard. But at the end of it, you also have something huge to look forward to. And I'm not saying that everybody has an Olympics to look forward to, or everybody has a national championship to look forward to. It's your own short-term goal that you set for yourself that can be completely, unrelated to anything else that is happening around you. And, but it is something that wakes you up in the morning. Like I always say this about golf. I say golf is the last thing I think of when I go to bed, and my golf goals put me to sleep and my golf goals wake me up the next morning. So for me, that's my driving force, to try and keep trying and be persistent and be relentless is the word I think I'd like to, talk about, where yes, it's a habit because your body is finally used to it, but you keep at it year after year after year because of those short-term goals that you set for yourself, and you were smart enough to set for yourself, that inspire you to say, okay, I achieved this. This is one more step along the way. This is one more step along the way. And I honestly believe that if my only goal in my swimming career from the age of 7 was I want to be an Arjuna Awardee and an Olympian, there are chances I would have never made it. But my goals at 7 was to be the fastest in the state, then the country. Then at 11, I wanted to be a national champion. And my goals evolved with time, but they were always fresh goals, and they were always set at the beginning of the year. And then we did a review at the end of the year. There's a nice story, if I may, share, where there are a lot of golfers that I follow, world-class golfers. And one of them says that he writes his goals down on a boarding pass on the first flight of the year he makes to the tournament. And he writes it at the back of his boarding pass, and he puts that boarding pass into his bag. And once the season is done at the end of the year, he takes out that boarding pass and he checks how many he did. And more importantly, there are so many goals that he hasn't achieved, which is to show people that he's trying to inspire that we are all human and nobody's perfect. And there are always going to be things that we don't end up achieving. But there are also going to be things that we do achieve. And those are those little short-term things along the way that inspire us to keep going, which is my answer to you, that this is the way I learned to keep going over and over and over again. And like I said, the joy of winning a medal or the joy of a personal best time or breaking a record far outweighed the short-term joy or gratification of going to a party or going to a holiday or going to, something that would give you instant pleasure. And, you say that it's like you have to have one yes, which is your bigger yes. So my bigger yes was winning and improving and achieving. And my smaller yes was, okay, I'll make this party, or okay, I'll get to my holiday, or okay, I'll do other things that may give me joy in that moment. And that's where you learn that sacrificing has value and is important as well.
So Rehan,
Yes.
these goals, and I see a lot of parallels for probably lessons for most of us as probably as entrepreneurs or corporate
Yes.
or professionals or in whatever we do. Setting these small goals, I appreciate it, but a lot of these success failures, and especially what I've seen of athletes over the years, seem to be very personal to them. And as a flip side, seem to be, I don't want to use the word, but I can't think of a better word, lonely to them. They're yours and yours alone. And
Correct.
they're quietly yours in that sense.
Sure.
So if there is doubt, it will creep into you itself. And how do you, so one would assume that the journey would always be up, but I know from an experience as a swim dad, etc., that there are lots of downs. And in
Sure.
these small goals, how do you handle these small things that go down, especially when these goals are inherently to you alone?
Sure. Okay. So what I did personally, and I felt really worked for me, is I made it a point, and this is where when you say you're alone through this, and swimming is, and it is an individual sport, it's not a team sport. I still believe that you cannot do it alone. And this is where I feel it's so important to tell people that they must, while they are, working so hard at their individual personal goals, so to speak, it is so important for them to make an effort to find and surround themselves with the best people, and surround themselves with people, I think, who you can trust, and trust with your vision or trust with your goals. Now, my team, even though, like I said, swimming was an individual sport, my team, of course, sure, were my parents, but my team was my coach. It was my nutritionist. It was my physical trainer, and it was my mental trainer. And it was almost like a relay team that I had, that I took from one tournament to the other. And this was a team that I could absolutely trust with everything that I did or I set for myself with. So when failure happened or failure hit me, I had people to talk to, and I had people to remind me of who I was when I was more successful in that moment. It's very lonely with golf as well. It's a very, very lonely sport. You're doing hour after hour on your own. Like you say, in swimming, you can't hear anybody else. You're in the water, and that's about it. But I believe you do not have to do it alone. You can and should have people around you that you can trust. And more importantly, you feel that when you finally achieve success, and I know everybody is human, but they are almost as happy for you as you are for yourself. And those are the sort of people that you should make an effort to find and surround yourselves with. So when I, for example, qualified and made the Olympics, my success was not only my own. I was so lucky that I could share it with my coaches, my parents, and an entire team, like I mentioned, all celebrating my success with me. Of course, it's not the only answer. You're still going to feel miserable when I use the word fail, but I don't like to use the word fail. When you don't make it to what you want at that moment in time. And it is at that moment that it's important for you to see the bigger picture, which is why I said that it is not an either or, where you say you either set a long-term goal or you set a short-term goal. You set a short-term goal, and you also have that one big thing at the back of your mind that you know is eventually your target. For example, if my long-term goal is to be an Arjuna Awardee and nothing else, and I know that an Arjuna Award can only come out of an X number of national championships and an Olympics, and if that's all I have to do, like I said, and I don't achieve it, I'm going to stop. If I have those short-term goals along the way that I do miss or I do fail at, I still know that this is not the be-all and end-all of my sport. I've still got that one big thing that I'm working toward. In the same way as, for example, if today I'm playing a round of golf and I want to shoot a score of 70, right, eventually at the end of the year, and I go out and shoot 80, which is 10 shots more than I want to, sure, I'm going to feel dejected and depressed and want to stop after that tournament. But if I tell myself that, okay, I've missed this short-term goal, but what am I working toward? Am I working toward only immediate success today? Or am I working towards something that I want to see come to fruition 5 years from now or 10 years from now? So while that huge long-term goal can be daunting and it can upset you and overwhelm you, it also becomes the one thing, along with, of course, the support, like I mentioned, that brings you back on track. To widen your horizon, to widen your vision, to say, just this one thing that I missed today is not the only thing that I have to achieve or not achieve for the day. There's also going to be tomorrow. With golf, it's telling ourselves that today is not going to be, I'm going to play another 1,000 rounds of golf. With swimming, on the days I lost in swimming, I became better and better at learning from my mistakes, like I mentioned earlier. But I also always reminded myself that there's always going to be another race, and there's always going to be another championship. And this is when I was younger and I was getting from, at the age of 16 to 17 to 18. And when we are teenagers, especially, we sometimes fail to control our emotions. We manage to handle them better maybe when we are a little older. And it is at that point that I told myself that I'm not here only to win a gold medal today. I'm here to be as great as and as big as my goals are. That will possibly happen at 25. So if I'm going to stop and I'm going to stop being persistent at this and I'm going to stop persevering at this, how am I ever going to reach there at that point? So for me, this is what worked extremely well, is doing both, is having a team. And I always, and it sounds very, I'm saying it as very brashly, but I really, Jemit, made an effort to surround myself with people that I knew could say one thing to me, but in that one sentence, it would do so much for my self-confidence and my mental strength. Because these are not people that you are just regular friends with on a day-to-day basis. These are people who you can trust with your entire life's goals. So while you say it is personal, sure, only I know what I really, really, really want from my career. But you can, and this is also part of your training and your investment in your career, where you make that effort to reach out and you make that effort to find, and it's also an effort really, to find those people that you can go to and you can talk to about your failures and your successes. So on bad days, they remind you of how great you were at one point in your career, while you also try to remind yourself that I have been a champion or have been successful at one point. So they also, remind you of that fact, and they're just there for you, solid rocks in your life. So the combination of having that great team around me and also one big long-term goal that always brought me back on track. Every time I wanted to, maybe stop, or I got a little distracted and I said, maybe this is not worth it anymore, I reminded myself that no, am I an Olympian yet? No, maybe I've lost a gold medal that I really wanted today, but it's got really nothing to do with a goal that I have a decade from now. So that's what steered my ship, so to speak, back on track.
Beautifully put, Rehan. In fact, sort of the analogy I'd love to use is, I have this phrase which I sort of fell in love with many years ago when I first read a book by this title, Mountains Beyond Mountains.
Okay.
It's a Haitian proverb. It's a book by Tracy Kidder. It's about a doctor.
Sure.
And a team which basically helps people in various countries deal with different diseases. But the key point there was that you climb one mountain and then there is another mountain, larger one, waiting to be climbed. And what you're combining, basically, if I take the mountain analogy a little further, is that there is this big mountain, but it's made up of small mountains that you keep climbing.
Correct.
Then you have a set of Sherpas with you, your team.
Right.
Whom you're trusting as you are climbing this mountain.
Correct. Absolutely. I have watched this seminar online once through this lockdown where they talk about, and I'm sure you've been part or have conducted these exercises because it is so prevalent in, corporate world, where they ask you, they do that exercise where they ask you to look at your finger and close your eye and then look at what's behind you and open your eye again. And at one point your focus is just your finger. And the other point, it is the entire ocean of your view behind you, which is basically what your short-term and long-term goals are, at least for me. So while it's important to, it works both ways. It's important to keep perspective on the finger and also on the background and what you're eventually hoping to achieve in terms of your your complete story, so to speak.
It's always fascinating to understand. But that's one mountain when you climbed and you reach the pinnacle. I can think of people who've climbed one big mountain in their lives, but you went and decided, अब ये बड़ा mountain तो I'm good enough. Now I will go back down to the base, probably at sea level, and climb another mountain, which is golf. To my mind, both are mad sports. Both are highly technical sports. It's you fighting yourself quietly. In swimming, you can't hear anybody. I'm sure in golf, you shut everybody out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And golf, Rehan, what are you made of? Why would you pick up golf?
So, is that the question?
The question is, how are you trying to now reach the pinnacle of golf?
I'll tell you what. First, let me say, and this is now through 7 years of experience, that swimming is possibly the hardest sport physically. Of course, mentally as well. Physical trauma that you put your body through in swimming is ridiculous. But with golf, if you were looking at the complete package of training and competing and the mental aspect of it and how inconsistent the sport is in general, it is the hardest thing that I have ever attempted to, achieve. So for the first 5 years, my family and friends questioned me and thought I was insane. Now I'm beginning to question myself. And but I'll tell you what, there's this quote by this book called, which somebody gifted me on a couple of birthdays back, called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And it's about a seagull and his mother, and they're having this part of it, and they're having this conversation. And the mother asks the seagull, his name is John, and she asks him, why, John, why is it so hard for you to be like the rest of the flock? Why don't you leave the low flying to the pelican and the albatross? And then she says, you're all bone and feathers. Why don't you eat, John? So John replies to his mother. He says, Mom, I don't care if I'm all bone and feathers. I just want to see what I can do in the air and what I can't, And if I were to put my entire decision to play golf in a nutshell or into a quote, this is the one line that I would choose. I just want to see what I can do in the air and what I can't. And coming back to the quote, which was, success is never final and learning never ends. I always say this, I may have stopped swimming, but I have never stopped being an athlete. And the reason, one of the simpler reasons why I play golf is I miss competing. And that is the reason why I chose to take up the sport. One of the biggest reasons why I'm still in the sport is because I have unfinished goals in the sport. I am an unhappy golfer. So in many ways, because I'm not yet where I want to be in terms of my personal goals in golf. And like I said, it is so hard from an emotional point of view, where you're used to so much success for so many years, and then having to start at the bottom all over again. But that also converts to making it such an amazing challenge in itself for me, where I walk into golf tournaments as an absolute nobody. Nobody cares what I've done in the pool. I don't care what I've done in the pool. I work with a coach today. I work 6 hours a day at the golf course, and then I do another hour of fitness. And I'm obsessive about it, as most golfers are in general. But my goals are no smaller than the goals I set for myself at swimming. And I honestly do not know, in my second innings really, whether I'll achieve these goals. But 10, 15, 20 years from now, I want to be able to tell myself that I did everything I possibly could to get there. And that's the same thought process I had when I swam. That if you can go to bed at night and put your head on the pillow and say that I gave it everything I had, and then if you don't make it, it's okay. It's absolutely okay. More than the swimming coaching part of the work that I do is very draining mentally and physically and emotionally. But more draining than that is the mentoring aspect of the work that I do with athletes, because so many athletes come to us or come to me broken, and they And a lot of them are honestly not looking to continue, but they are looking to figure out a way to stop and to heal from stopping and to be happy stopping. I've never really spoken about this too much because it's always success that you talk about. But there are a lot of athletes that also feel that they've given it their all, and comes to a point where they realize that that's their full potential, but they are unable to stop because they are just part of that habit and that process of going on. And they are not coming to me to say, make me a champion. They're coming to me to possibly remind themselves of how good they were, and that they did set a goal and they did achieve it, sure. And just because their win or their trophy or their medal was not as big as the next person's, doesn't mean that you can't stop or you can't call it a day and move on to something else that gives you joy, right? So when I play golf, there is a part of me that is absolutely miserable at a tournament because I feel that I'm not achieving what I want to yet, right? That's the optimistic bone in my body that keeps saying yet. But there is another part of me that keeps pulling me back to practice, Jaimit, is that I actually truly love the sport. I really love it. And when I say I love it, like I talked about the noise that my arms made in the water, when they crashed into the water, with the same analogy, I love the sound of a good contact of a golf club, a face of a golf club against a ball. I love practicing at 8 a.m. in the morning when you're nipping little golf balls off blades of grass with dew on them. Now, to a non-golfer or to a layman, this may sound completely, off, like what the hell is going on with this guy? But these are things that I didn't intrinsically love about the sport, but I have learned to love about the sport. Because like I said, and like we all experience, there are so many failures that we go through on a day-to-day basis, or so many bad days that we go through, that there has to be an effort to find things within that career of yours that you truly love about. And these are the little things that I absolutely love. So I can hit 60 crappy shots in 4 hours of golf, but it's the 10 great shots that I hit that get me back to the golf course the next morning. Combined with the fact that, like I said, there are certain aspects of the sport that I really, really love. So when you ask me, why do you do it? Sure, it is ridiculous to, after, spending 20 plus years in one competitive sport, to do it all over again. I mean, I started golf with tendinitis in one shoulder and a niggling pain in my, long-term injury in my rib muscle. So it's like saying, why do it? What more do you want out of sport? And, Rajesh, it took me 20 years to realize that true success is not only defined by the medals on your wall or the trophies on your wall. It is also defined by the ability to set a goal, or rather the courage to set a goal, and the ability to improve your craft, honing your craft, improving your craft, learning day after day to eventually get better. Now, how much better you get, nobody can really predict. But for me, I mean, now at 34, I look at success very differently than when I looked at it when I was 16 years old. And, I believe this, that our perceived success, or what we perceive as success when we are 12 years old, is very different from what we perceive as success when we are 20, and then when we are 30 and 40 and 50. But more value than just those medals is, I feel, are the learned ability, to handle that misfortune or handle that failure. And that handling of that eventually becomes a catalyst for our reinvention. So when you talk about, and I'll say it again, it is your ability to handle and how you handle your misfortune that ultimately defines who we are. And that handling of that misfortune becomes a catalyst for our reinvention. So going from swimming to golf is reinvention. When Rajesh mentioned he did more than most people or anyone did in his industry, and then he decided to do it all over again with something else. it's how you handle that moment that eventually, I believe really defines who you are. So sure, 10 years from now, I may have a wall full of golf trophies and all will be amazing in my world, or I may not. But I want to be able to look back and say that physically, mentally, I did everything I possibly could to get to my goals. Then if I didn't get there, it's secondary. And you mentioned this a little while ago, and I'll end this answer with this little thing, that there's going to be a mountain, and then there's going to be another mountain, and then there's another mountain. It honestly never ends. It really never ends. Michael Phelps ended his career as the most celebrated Olympian of all time. 2 years later, every single one of his world records were wiped out by younger swimmers who have now raised the bar even further. If he decides to make a comeback today, I don't want to have to regret what I'm saying, but there are going to be so many swimmers who he's competing with that are as fast and way faster than he's ever been in the pool. So it really never ends. You're going to reach one milestone and then you will want more. And as human beings, I think we are greedy people where a certain amount of success, it's never enough. And that's why I think I play golf. I mean, who wouldn't want to end his sporting career with the achievements I've had, right? But it's clearly not enough for me. And therefore, I realized that it's not only about the medals. It's also about the process and enjoying the process and falling in love with learning a new craft and honing your skills and just trying to, like you said in the beginning when I said you were optimistic, what can I do today to be that much better? Now, this is an approach that took me 20 years to understand after I stopped swimming. This was not, sure, it was my approach, but not like it is today when I play golf.
And you meet a lot of young kids in there, all with dreams. They look up to you as an idol.
Correct.
If you were to tell them one or two things that you know now, which you perhaps didn't as a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old, what are a couple of things that you would tell them at the start of their careers?
Okay. I think the first thing, and it's a very repeated answer, but I think the first thing that I would tell every young kid who's just basically second or third year into his hopefully long career is perseverance is key. Persevere. A better word to use is be relentless, in chasing your goals. And it's very important to tell, because it's an extremely competitive world today, and we are constantly, either we are comparing ourselves to others, or parents are comparing their kids to other kids, or if you're a competitive athlete, you're comparing yourself constantly to your competitors, right? And so it's very important to remind them that the only true measure of success that you should go by, or the only yardstick you should go by, is your own personal improvement. Because like I said when I talked about Michael Phelps, there is always going to be somebody, always, that is not as good as you, and there's always going to be somebody who's better than you. But if you spend the majority of your time and your energy focusing on all that you cannot control, which is other people's performances, that's so little time spent thinking about your own. So we are human. We always want to compare. We always aspire to beat others. But I would tell a young kid to master the art as quickly as he can, to make his focus about how fast he can improve for himself, and how fast he can improve, and how well he can improve. So if that was my first lesson to give, I'll say focus more on your own goals and measure your success and define your success by how well you did, as opposed to how well you were doing the previous year. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is, when I talk about perseverance, I have to say that over, not only swim smart, but also over a career that's now, if you count golf also, it's more than 2 decades of sport. I've realized that there are some children who are extremely, extremely talented. Okay. And then there are some kids who have a fair amount of talent, but are extremely hardworking. And success to those talented young kids comes very quickly. They work a little hard for a year or two, and suddenly they find huge success. And then there are kids who always are in the background, and are not really making it big in the first couple of years of their sport or their career, but they are patient and they are hardworking. And to those kids, I have to say that success takes its time. Many a time, success takes its own sweet time, but success comes. You know, if my success was saying that I want to be an Olympian, sure, it didn't, just because I decided I was a top swimmer of the country, that I wanted to, you know, make the Olympics in 2004. It was a big ask, and it didn't happen for me. It's not that I decided, I snapped a finger and it happened. It didn't happen. It waited. It kept me waiting another 4 years till I eventually got my success. So my whole journey or my whole story, I always like to focus also on the failures to make people understand that we are human and we are going to fail. But persevere and be patient and give success time, because it will come. Don't constantly compare yourself to the person who is better than you, who may not even be as hardworking, who may be just a little more talented with a little more luck. But I really feel that it's the ones who persevere and are relentless over a period of time that eventually reach success that is far bigger. You know, so, and the last thing I have to say, and this is nothing really to do with results really, is, and especially for young kids and also to parents, is be a little kinder to yourself. You know, we are living in a world of, I think also social media, where you're exposed to only hyperachievers all the time. I mean, there are very few people. I mean, I don't know of a single person who's going to go on Instagram or on Facebook and say, here's a list of my failures. Here's when I really sucked big time at everything I chose to do, right? So everybody's, I mean, you could have an absolutely horrible day, but if you're on Instagram, you're going to talk about how amazing your holiday was, how amazing you are, how, you know, how great your family is, and everything positive. And that's very nice. But that's all we are exposed to, and that's all young kids are exposed to today. You know, the charmed life and huge success, they are following people who their role models are, whose newsfeed is only filled with larger than life images. So at one level, it's amazing that they get to see what success brings. But at another level, I really believe that as a result, a lot of kids, and also me also, for example, we end up being very hard on ourselves and beating ourselves up too much. And we don't necessarily need a over-pressuring parent to do the job for us anymore. We do it to ourselves. And honestly, you know, if you work, for example, if you started sport at the age of 6 and you've decided to stop at 16, for how many people do you know, can you say, have committed 10 years of their life to intense hard work, pressure, day after day after day, relentless, you know, pain, and so much more that goes into, you know, your pursuing of your goals. And you have to remind yourself that, come on, man, just because you don't have that trophy that you always wanted, look what you did over 10 years of your life. And that in itself is a trophy. I know it's very easy to preach when you have the trophy on your wall, but if you can remind yourself of what you've done and what you forced or asked your body and mind to do over that 5 years or 10 years, how many friends do you know who, I mean, you know closely, who have actually had the courage to live that life? And it's because you talked about what I would say to kids who play sport that I'm saying this, that it is the easiest thing in the world to not choose sport, to not choose a life that demands so much of you in terms of your, you know, your effort, and just be a regular happy kid who goes to school, comes back, plays, grows up, goes to parties, dates, has fun, you know, and I'm not saying that's wrong. That's very nice. There are many times in, you know, on my bad days at golf that I really look back and say, maybe it would have not been such a bad thing if sport didn't happen to me, because you know, honestly, because I believe that at some level I'm very jaded and I'm very numb to a lot of emotions today because of how hard sport has made me and how thick-skinned sport has made me. So I sometimes look at, you know, you mentioned mentoring children. There are 2 kids who are siblings, who are brothers, and one is playing sport and the other is not. And I'm sometimes envious of the child who hasn't played sport, because he's just such a happy child, you know, and the other one wants the medals and the trophies. So I would say to the child that wants the medals and trophies, that if you choose to live a life that is different from your brother or your sister or your friends, which is such a happy, fun life of just being a kid, and you're losing your fun of your childhood, at such a young age where you have to be an adult at 12, then be kind to yourself if you don't, achieve everything that your parents or your coaches or you set for yourself. Give yourself a little more credit. I'm going to end with this. I played golf today with a 12-year-old boy, and first of all, he started calling me uncle, which I did not like. And I told him, I'm not going to talk to you if you call me uncle. But I watched him play, those 18 holes of golf. And I could see that there was a part of him, and this is the first time I've played with this kid, very conscientious, good kid. I could see that there's a part of him that just wants to be an 11-year-old kid on a golf course running around. But he knew his coach is watching. Now, incidentally, his coach and my coach is the same person. He was walking with us and watching us play. And I could see that there was this huge effort to be a mature adult and live up to his coach's expectations and do this. And he's probably been doing this since he was 5 years old. He's going to be doing it for the next 10, the poor guy, So if he maybe want to end up his career as a national champion or a masters champion. But if he doesn't, there has to be somebody along the way that reminds him that at 11, you showed, the class and the maturity of a very seasoned athlete. And he really did. And that's what I would tell to every athlete that chooses to take on, the goals that we choose to take on. Like Jayamit said, what are you made of? It's not what are you made of. It's literally what are you thinking? So that's my answer. Yeah.
Beautifully put, Rehan. I think just listening to you over the past hour, I think I see so many similarities to not just sport, but to life in general.
Yes.
To the way we choose how we want to live our life. And also for entrepreneurship. I mean, the ups and downs. Yes. I've been an entrepreneur for sort of 28 years, yes. Almost as long as you've started in sport.
Yes.
And it's that journey, it's the destination, it's the learnings which come on the way, it's the ability to handle the failures. I think amazing story of yours. I think very, very inspirational at so many levels.
Thank you.
I'll hand it back to Jayamit for the closing words.
Yes, Rehan, thanks a lot. And now I realize, and I thank you for coming on hippoBrain, and I realize why you are in such a demand speaker, because I think the story is so beautiful. It's straight from the heart and it's inspiring. See, when we started on this hippoBrain journey, and Rajesh and me have been interviewing some really good hippoBrains. I wouldn't call it interviewing, just having conversations and listening to them speak about their lives. And it's been absolutely fascinating on a lot of levels with a lot of different people.
Sure.
With you, I dare say that even when I look back at my career, there are various points of self-doubt. And I like what you're saying, and it really applies to me. I'm 45. And
I'm not going to call you uncle. Don't worry.
Thanks for not calling me an uncle. Yes, you're right. And I look back and I say, what you're saying is right. You keep some of your big goals in mind, but you keep your short-term goals. You take some of your failures. You learn from some of your failures. You don't need to go every day and, just hit a world record every day. You need to hit small things. I think even today, and for some point in the middle, I was lost when you were speaking, because my life was flashing in front of me, Rehan, and I don't allow myself to be so emotional about it. But you did make me emotional in that sense, Kate. I looked at it and said, you're right. It's probably a lesson that a 45-year-old also can look and take heart and work with it. So thanks a lot, Rehan. At the end of the day, I just want to say one thing, that I think your life reminds, when I asked you the question, Kis mitti se bane ho, yaar, what do you eat or what do you think? George Mallory, I think in 1920s was asked, why do you want to climb Mount Everest? I think they realized that Mount Everest was like one of the biggest things, and they wanted to climb it. And he famously answered the 3 famous words in mountaineering: because it is there.
Very nice.
That's what you're doing. You're doing because it's there to be conquered. Thank you, Rehan.
More of this. Thank you. I'm going to steal this for my next talk. Oh, definitely. Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Rehan, and fascinating hippoBrain conversation. Thank you for being a great host, and thank you, viewers. Please do listen and subscribe to many such hippoBrain conversations. Slowly by slowly, they're changing my life. I'm 100% sure if you're listening to them as well, I think some of your life will change as well, and I hope in a much more positive way. Thank you all, and thank you, Rehan.